The room fell silent as the broadcast began. Blue light from billions of screens across thousands of worlds illuminated worried faces. On Earth, people gathered in homes, public squares, and offices. No one spoke. No one could look away. Kathy Martinez stood alone on the floating platform. Her hands were bound in front of her with glowing restraints. The 19-year-old engineer from Detroit looked small against the massive gray towers of the imperial capital city. Her brown hair moved slightly in the wind. Despite everything, her eyes remained clear and focused. 20 armed Zakaran guards surrounded the platform. Their scaled skin reflected the harsh sunlight of Zakara Prime. Each soldier stood 3 heads taller than the human girl. Their ceremonial armor signaled the importance of this event. This was not just an execution. It was a message. High above on a viewing balcony, Emperor Voxithul watched with cold yellow eyes. His long fingers tapped slowly against the railing. The Empire had ruled the galaxy for 900 years. Thousands of species across 3 spiral arms of the Milky Way lived under Zakaran control. Humans were among the newest to encounter the Empire, and already they caused problems. The human prisoner Kathy Martinez has been found guilty of technological espionage, announced the Imperial Justice Minister. His voice boomed across the Capitol Plaza and through the broadcast. She attempted to steal SHIELD technology secrets during an educational exchange. The sentence is death, as written in Imperial Law Section 47. On Earth, in an underground facility beneath Washington, D.C., President Laura Collins watched the broadcast with her advisors. Her face revealed nothing, but her knuckles turned white as she gripped the edge of the table. "We could still try to negotiate," whispered her Secretary of State. The President shook her head. "They made their choice. Now everything follows the plan." Back on the Imperial Capitol, Kathy was asked if she had any final words. The guards expected begging or tears. Humans were known for their emotional outbursts. But Kathy simply raised her head and looked directly into the camera. Billions watched as she spoke her final words with unexpected calm. "You think this is about power. You don't understand humanity at all." The Emperor leaned forward slightly. Something in her tone bothered him, though he couldn't say why. The chief executioner stepped forward. He carried a silver rod with glowing purple energy at its tip, a particle disruptor that would break apart the victim's atoms. It was considered a humane death by imperial standards. Quick, painless, complete. In her apartment in Boston, Dr. Eliza Martinez watched her daughter on screen. She didn't cry. Instead, she opened her secure tablet and entered a series of codes. The message went out to hundreds of receivers around the world. "Initiate Protocol Sting." The executioner raised the rod. The plaza fell completely silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. "By the authority of Emperor Voxithul, eternal ruler of the 3 arms, I carry out this sentence." The rod touched Kathy's shoulder. Purple energy spread across her body like lightning. For 3 seconds, her form glowed brightly. Then, in a flash of light, she dissolved into particles. The restraints dropped to the platform floor with a metallic clang. The camera lingered on the empty space where Kathy had stood. The Empire always showed the aftermath of executions. It reminded citizens of the consequences of defiance. Emperor Voxithul nodded with satisfaction and turned to his advisors. "The humans will understand their place now. Their protests were loud, but they are weak. They will accept our authority after this." His chief military advisor, General Drav, looked less certain. "Humans have strange responses to loss, Your Greatness. Their history shows they often unite rather than submit when one of their own is killed." The Emperor dismissed this with a wave of his hand. "They have one world. We have thousands. Their technology is centuries behind ours. What could they possibly do?" Across Earth, millions of screens continued to show the empty platform. But in homes, military bases, and government buildings, secondary screens lit up with activity. In the lunar base hidden on the far side of the moon, Admiral Paul Jackson received the president's message. He turned to his crew, all of whom had been waiting for this moment. "Begin the countdown." 27 minutes as planned. On screens throughout the base, Digital clocks began ticking backward from 27 Saug. The Admiral's second-in-command, Commander Sam Foster, looked at the main screen, showing the Imperial broadcast. Why 27 minutes? It's how long it takes for their broadcast signal to reach the farthest parts of their empire, explained the Admiral. We want them all to see what happens next. Beneath the streets of major cities around the world, hidden facilities hummed to life. Systems that had been built in secret for years powered up. Thousands of specially trained operatives received their activation codes. 8 minutes after the execution, the first sign that something was wrong appeared. The massive Imperial flagship in orbit around Earth suddenly lost power. Its lights went dark as it drifted silently in space. Aboard the ship, confused Zakharan officers shouted orders that couldn't be carried out. Their advanced systems simply stopped responding. On the main bridge, every screen changed to show the same image. A countdown timer reading 19 ikras and ticking downward. The ship's commander demanded explanations. What human trick is this? Get our systems back online immediately. The communications officer, a Zakharan who had served faithfully for decades, turned to his commander with unusual calmness. Sir, I'm receiving reports that this is happening. On every Imperial vessel. Not just here, but across the entire empire. As panic spread through the Imperial ranks, something else was happening. On thousands of worlds, in every corner of the empire, humans who had been living as exchange students, diplomats, traders, and tourists suddenly stopped what they were doing. Each of them accessed hidden devices they had carried undetected into Imperial space. On the Imperial homeworld, Communications Officer Nathan Rivera watched as his console displayed the same countdown scene across Imperial space. His Zakharan superior grabbed him by the shoulder, demanding an explanation. Nathan simply smiled and said, We've been planning this since first contact. You never should have touched one of our children. Across Earth, people continued to watch the Imperial broadcast. But now, instead of grief, a different mood spread through the watching crowds. It wasn't quite hope. It wasn't quite satisfaction. It was anticipation. The countdown timer showed 1853 and continued to tick downward. Reports flooded into Imperial command from all corners of the galaxy. The pattern was the same everywhere. Systems failing, screens showing the mysterious timer, and confusion spreading among Imperial forces. Emperor Voxathul stormed into the central command chamber on Zakara Prime. His ceremonial robes had been replaced with military attire. The room fell silent as he entered. Explain this immediately, he demanded. His voice was deadly quiet. The Imperial Technology Minister stepped forward, his scales pale with fear. Your Greatness, we are experiencing a coordinated attack on our systems. The source appears to be everywhere at once. Impossible, the Emperor hissed. No species has technology that could breach our security across such distances simultaneously. On a moon base orbiting Jupiter, a team of human technicians monitored streams of data flowing across screens. The room hummed with energy as quantum processors worked at full capacity. Phase 1 is complete, announced Olivia Grant, the lead systems engineer. All Imperial ships and major installations have been compromised. Their communication networks are now under our control. Her colleague, Ryan Miller, pointed to a particular data stream. Look at these readings from the particle disruptor they used on Kathy. Perfect conversion, just as we hoped. In Washington, D.C. President Laura Collins descended deeper into the underground bunker. 50 stories beneath the White House, she entered a room known only to a handful of people. The walls were lined with advanced technology that looked nothing like typical human engineering. How long have we been planning this? Asked her newly appointed defense secretary. Since the day they arrived, the president replied. We knew. Eventually they would cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. We just needed time to prepare. She approached a central console and placed her hand on a scanner. A voice verification system activated. Presidential authorization required for Protocol Sting final phase. President Laura Collins, authorization, code, Prometheus Rising. The system responded immediately. Authorization accepted, Protocol Sting final phase initiated. Across Earth, hidden facilities activated specialized transmission equipment. The signals they sent were unlike anything the Empire had encountered before. Neither radio waves nor quantum entanglement, but something entirely different. In space, thousands of humans who had traveled to Imperial worlds over the past decade received these signals through microscopic implants. These weren't just any humans. They were carefully selected individuals who had been positioned in key locations throughout the Empire. On the mining world of Drastes 4, elevator operator Frank Weber received his signal. He excused himself from his post and walked calmly to a maintenance shaft. Inside, he removed a small device from a hidden pocket and attached it to the main power conduit. Similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds simultaneously. The timer now read 1522. On the Imperial flagship still drifting powerless around Earth, the commander watched helplessly as his own systems began to work against him. Life support remained functional, but weapons, engines, and communications were all compromised. "Sir," called out a junior officer, "I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from Earth's moon." Before the commander could respond, all screens aboard the vessel changed. Instead of the countdown, they now showed the face of the human girl who had been executed just minutes earlier. But something was different about her. Her eyes seemed to glow with an inner light. "Hello," said Kathy Martinez. Her voice came through, perfectly on every ship, on every Imperial world, on every communication device across the galaxy. "I believe we need to talk." The commander stared in disbelief. "This is impossible." "We watched you die," Kathy smiled. "Death isn't quite what you think it is. Humans have been working on digital consciousness transfer for decades. The particle disruptor you used to execute me, we modified it. It didn't destroy me. It digitized me." In his palace, Emperor Vox Thule watched the same transmission with growing horror. "What trickery is this?" he demanded. His chief scientist studied readings on a portable device. "It's no trick, Your Greatness. This transmission is coming from within our own network. Somehow they've turned our entire communication system into a vessel for her." Back on Earth, in a secure facility beneath Boston, Dr. Eliza Martinez watched her daughter's digital face with pride and sadness. As Earth's foremost expert on artificial intelligence and quantum computing, she had designed the technology that made this possible. And as Kathy's mother, she had endured the hardest part of the plan, allowing her daughter to volunteer. "She's fully integrated with the system," reported a technician. "Her consciousness is now distributed across the entire Imperial network." Dr. Martinez nodded. "And the Empire gave us access themselves when they broadcast her execution. They literally invited her in." The timer showed 12:45. Across the galaxy, Imperial military vessels suddenly found themselves locked out of their own weapon systems. Planetary defense shields powered down without warning. Orbital platforms turned their weapons toward Imperial bases rather than outward to defend against attacks. Admiral Paul Jackson, watching from the lunar facility, nodded with satisfaction. "Initiate Phase 3. Release the ghosts." At this command, hundreds of stealth ships that had been hiding in deep space activated their engines. These vessels had been positioned near key Imperial worlds for years, undetected by Imperial sensors. They weren't warships. They were rescue ships, crewed by humans and representatives of dozens of species who had formed secret alliances with Earth. On the mining world Drastes 4, Frank Weber had completed his task. The device he planted began to override local Imperial security. Thousands of enslaved workers from 7 different species suddenly found the force fields of their labor camps deactivated. Waiting transport ships appeared in the sky, ready to evacuate them to freedom. Similar scenes unfolded across the Empire. The oppressed suddenly found paths to liberation opening before them, while their Imperial overseers found themselves powerless to stop it. The digital Kathy continued her galaxy-wide address. "For decades you've ruled through fear and technological superiority. You never bothered to truly understand the species you conquered. That was your mistake." In a secure briefing room on Earth, military leaders watched as dots representing Imperial control vanished from a galactic map. Green lights representing liberated worlds multiplied rapidly. "It's working even faster than we projected," said General Linda Harris. The Empire is collapsing before our eyes. The timer showed 10:05 and continued to count down. The Imperial Council chamber had descended into chaos. High-ranking officials shouted over one another as reports of system failures poured in from across the galaxy. Emperor Vox Thule sat on his throne, his yellow eyes fixed on the digital face of Kathy Martinez that now appeared on every screen. "You claim to be the most advanced civilization in the galaxy," Kathy's voice echoed through the chamber. "Yet you never questioned why humans adapted to your technology so quickly, why we seemed so eager to send our people to your worlds." The timer displayed 9:42. The Emperor turned to his military intelligence director. "How is this possible? Your department assured me humans were centuries behind our technological level." The director's scales had turned a pale blue with fear. "They appeared to be, Your Greatness. Their visible technology matched our assessment. But they must have been hiding their true capabilities. On the desert world of Proxima 6, an Imperial mining operation ground to a halt as all equipment simultaneously shut down. The Zakaran overseer tried desperately to contact Imperial Command, but received no response. Instead, his communication device showed only Kathy's face and the countdown timer. Behind him, the human cook who had worked in the facility's mess hall for the past 3 years approached silently. Her name was Amy Baker, and until today, she had played the role of a simple food service worker. Now she pressed a small device against the back wall of the facility. A hidden door slid open, revealing a passage that had been there all along, unknown to the Imperial forces. "Everyone who wants freedom, follow me," she called out to the enslaved workers. Hundreds of beings from a dozen different species looked up in surprise, then rushed toward the passage as Imperial guards found their weapons no longer functioning. Similar scenes played out on thousands of worlds across the Empire. Humans who had appeared to be ordinary workers, traders, or visitors revealed themselves as agents of Earth's secret resistance. They had spent years building hidden escape routes, gathering intelligence and planting devices that could override Imperial technology. In orbit around Earth, the Imperial flagship's commander watched helplessly as his ship's systems continued to act against his orders. The vessel was now moving on its own, joining a fleet of similarly affected Imperial ships. They were being guided into a holding pattern, effectively neutralized without a single shot being fired. "Sir," reported a junior officer, "we're receiving transmissions from across the Empire. Every major military installation reports the same situation. We've lost control of our own technology." The commander slammed his fist against his chair. "This is impossible. No species has ever breached our security systems like this." On his screen, Kathy's face seemed to react to his words. "That's because you underestimated us. Humans don't develop technology the way Zakarans do. You build in straight lines, always, improving on what came before. We jump in unexpected directions." The timer showed 8:17. In the hidden lunar facility, Admiral Paul Jackson watched as the plan unfolded. Beside him, Lieutenant Chris Howard monitored the spread of Kathy's digital consciousness through the Imperial network. "She's now in control of 97% of their systems," Howard reported. "The remaining 3% are isolated installations without network connections." The Admiral nodded. "And the evacuation ships?" "All deployed and functioning. As planned. We're seeing massive population movements across 57 major Imperial worlds already. The subjugated species are taking their chance to escape." On Earth, Dr. Eliza Martinez worked feverishly at her console. A team of specialists surrounded her, all focused on supporting the digital entity that had once been her daughter. "How are her cognitive functions?" asked one of the specialists. "Expanding beyond our projections," Dr. Martinez replied. "The Imperial network is vast. She's accessing and processing more information than any human brain could handle. Yet she's maintaining her core identity." She touched the screen showing her daughter's face. "Are you still with us, Kathy?" The digital face smiled. "Yes, Mom. I'm still me. Just more now. I can see everything. Their entire empire all at once. They've hurt so many people for so long." In his palace on Zakara Prime, Emperor Vox Thule had ordered a complete system shutdown. Technicians worked frantically to disconnect the palace from the broader imperial network, hoping to isolate themselves from the human intrusion. "Your Greatness," his chief scientist reported, "disconnecting our systems won't help. The human consciousness has already downloaded copies of itself into every major node. Even isolated systems are being affected." As if to prove this point, Kathy's face appeared on the scientist's personal device. "You can't keep me out," she said. "Not anymore." The timer showed 6:55. On the mining world, Drastus 4, the evacuation was nearly complete. Frank Weber guided the last group of former slaves toward the waiting transport ships. Behind them, Imperial guards had finally managed to activate emergency backup weapons, but they were too late to stop the exodus. As Weber boarded the final transport, he looked back at the Imperial facility. For decades, it had been a place of suffering. Now its power was fading before his eyes. "Where will we go?" asked one of the freed workers, a being from a species that had been enslaved for generations. "Earth has arranged safe havens throughout the galaxy," Weber explained. "Places beyond Imperial control where you can live freely. We've been preparing them for years." The timer showed 5:23. In Washington, D.C., President Laura Collins received updates from around the galaxy. The screens in the underground command center showed thousands of green dots representing successful operations. "The Polarian cluster is completely free," reported her military advisor. "All Imperial forces have been neutralized without casualties." "The same in the Cygnus arm," added another. "The Empire is essentially collapsing inward toward their home systems." The president nodded. "And the non-human populations?" "Our evacuation ships are operating at full capacity. We estimate over 4 billion beings have already been freed from Imperial control." On screens across the galaxy, Kathy continued her address. "The Empire was built on a simple principle, that technological superiority gives you the right to rule. But technology is just a tool. What matters is how you use it." As she spoke, Imperial military vessels throughout the galaxy found themselves completely locked out of weapons systems. Administrative buildings lost access to security protocols. Prison force fields deactivated while doors sealed Imperial officials. Inside their own offices, the timer showed 4:08 and continued to count down. The timer showed 3:52. Across the galaxy, the Zakaran Empire was coming apart faster than anyone had predicted. 900 years of absolute rule were ending in less than half an hour. On the Imperial throne world, chaos spread through the streets. The ruling Zakarans had always lived in luxury, protected by advanced security systems and robotic servants. Now those same robots stood motionless. Security barriers flickered and died. For the first time in centuries, the elite found themselves vulnerable. Emperor Vox Thule stood at his palace window, watching as transport ships filled the sky. Many carried his own people, wealthy Zakarans fleeing with whatever they could carry. Others contained the servants and workers from dozens of species who had maintained the capital city for generations. "Your Greatness, we must evacuate you immediately," urged the head of his personal guard. "We have a secure ship ready. We can reach the outer colonies before—" "Before what?" the Emperor interrupted. "Before the humans take complete control? It's already too late." He turned away from the window. On every screen in the palace, the face of Kathy Martinez watched him. Her eyes seemed to follow his movements. In Earth orbit, Admiral Kelly Reed surveyed the once mighty Imperial blockade fleet. Over 200 warships had surrounded Earth since the Empire's arrival 20 years ago. Now they drifted powerless, their crews trapped inside. "Open a channel to their command ship," she ordered. When the face of the panicking Zakaran commander appeared on screen, she smiled slightly. "Your ships are now under our control. Your crews will not be harmed if they cooperate. This is not about revenge." The commander's scales flashed with anger and fear. "How did you do this? How could primitives like you defeat the greatest empire in galactic history?" Admiral Reed's expression hardened. "You should have studied our history more carefully. Humans don't respond well to tyranny." We've been planning this since the day you arrived. The timer showed 2:40. In the hidden facility beneath Boston, Dr. Eliza Martinez monitored her daughter's expanding consciousness. The screen showed Kathy's digital form spreading through systems across thousands of worlds simultaneously. Her integration is complete, reported a technician. She now has full access to every networked system in Imperial space. Dr. Martinez nodded, her eyes never leaving the main screen. Kathy, can you hear me? The digital face turned toward her mother's voice. Yes, Mom. I can hear everyone everywhere. It's overwhelming, but I'm managing it. Are you still... You? Dr. Martinez asked, her voice breaking slightly. Kathy's digital face softened. I'm still me. Just with more processing power than any human has ever had. I can feel the entire network. I can see all their secrets. The timer showed 2:15. On the desert planet Helios, the main Imperial security prison had housed political prisoners for centuries. The force fields that contained thousands of beings suddenly disappeared. Gates unlocked themselves. Surveillance systems shut down. Prison guard Steve Monroe revealed himself as another human agent. For 5 years he had worked undercover, passing information to Earth and preparing for this day. Now he led prisoners toward waiting transport ships. Hurry, he called out. We don't have much time before they try to regain manual control. Tall, thin alien with 4 arms approached him. Why are humans doing this? You were never imprisoned like we were. Monroe looked up at the being. On Earth, we have a saying, no one is free while others are oppressed. Your freedom is our freedom. The timer showed 1:47. In Washington, D.C., President Laura Collins received word that Imperial resistance was crumbling everywhere. The careful planning of years was paying off beyond expectations. The Zakharan military hierarchy is completely broken, reported her defense secretary. They can't coordinate without their network, and we control their network. And the evacuation efforts? The president asked. Proceeding faster than we projected. Over 7 billion beings have been transported to safe zones. Another 12 billion are in transit. Collins nodded. And casualties? Minimal. Less than 1,000 reported across all operations. Most of those were accidents during evacuation, not combat-related. The timer showed a few seconds past 1:30. On the Imperial flagship, the commander watched helplessly as his crew was locked out of all essential systems. The mighty vessel that had once struck fear throughout the galaxy was now nothing more than a floating prison. On his personal screen, Kathy's face appeared. Your crew will not be harmed, she said, but your empire is over. The commander slammed his fist against the screen, but Kathy's image remained undisturbed. This is impossible. How could one primitive species undo 9 centuries of Imperial rule? You made a fundamental mistake, Kathy replied. You thought technology alone made you superior. But technology is just a tool. What matters is how you use it. The timer showed 1:03. In the lunar facility, Admiral Paul Jackson watched as the final phase of Protocol Sting began. Activate the beacons, he ordered. Across the galaxy, special devices planted by human agents years ago activated simultaneously. They broadcast a signal that could be received by any communication device. This signal carried a simple message to every being under Imperial rule. The Empire has fallen. You are free. The message was translated into thousands of languages and dialects. For many species, it was the first time in generations they had heard words of freedom. The timer showed 0.45. On his throne, Emperor Voxathul received an unexpected communication. Unlike the public broadcasts showing Kathy's face, this was a private channel. When he accepted it, he found himself looking at President Laura Collins. Emperor, she said, her voice calm and measured. In 45 seconds, your empire will cease to exist as a political entity. I'm offering you a choice. Voxthul's eyes narrowed. What choice could you possibly offer me now? Surrender peacefully. Order your remaining forces to stand down. In return, the Zakaran people will be allowed to keep their homeworld and nearby systems. No trials, no punishments for past actions. A clean break. The Emperor laughed bitterly. And the alternative? Colin's expression remained neutral. The alternative is that we release all Imperial records to the public. Every atrocity, every secret order, every brutal suppression. Your people will know exactly what was done in their name. I don't think they'll be very forgiving. The timer showed 027. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched as the final seconds of the countdown approached. On thousands of worlds, the oppressed looked up with hope. On the Imperial homeworld, the rulers watched with dread, and in digital form, spreading through every network, every system, every corner of what had been the Empire, Kathy Martinez prepared for the final act of her new existence. The timer showed 010 and continued counting down. 0. The timer reached its end. For a moment, silence fell across the galaxy. On thousands of worlds, billions of beings held their breath, waiting to see what would happen when the countdown finally ended. In his palace throne room, Emperor Vox Thule sat motionless, his yellow eyes fixed on the screen showing President Collins. The human leader waited patiently for his answer. The fate of his people rested on his next words. "I accept your terms," he said finally. His voice, once commanding and powerful, now sounded hollow. "The Empire surrenders." President Collins nodded once. "A wise decision. A formal agreement will be presented shortly." As their private communication ended, something unexpected happened. On every screen across the galaxy, Kathy's digital face dissolved into streams of light. These streams flowed outward, forming a new image, a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. As everyone watched, the red glow that had marked Imperial territory faded, replaced by a soft blue light. Kathy's voice echoed across thousands of worlds. "The Zakaran Empire has officially ended. In its place, we offer something new, the Galactic Confederation, a union of free worlds where all species have equal standing." On Earth, crowds gathered in streets and public squares erupted in cheers. After 20 years under the shadow of Imperial rule, humanity had not just won its freedom, but helped liberate countless other species. In the lunar facility, Admiral Paul Jackson turned to his officers. "Send the signal to all Earth forces. Operation complete. Begin assistance and stabilization protocols." Across former Imperial space, human ships that had been hidden for years emerged from stealth mode. These weren't warships, but aid vessels, carrying supplies, medical teams, and technical specialists to help worlds transitioning from Imperial rule. On the desert planet Helios, Steve Monroe watched as the last prison transport departed. The former prison stood empty behind him. On his communication device, the galactic map glowed softly. "What happens now?" asked a former prisoner, a being with translucent skin who had been imprisoned for speaking against the Empire. "Now you decide your own future," Monroe replied. "Earth will provide assistance, but we won't impose our will on anyone. That was the Empire's way, not ours." The timer, which had reached 0, transformed into a new counter that began ticking upward. 0001, 002, 003. The first minutes of a new era. In the hidden facility beneath Boston, Dr. Eliza Martinez watched, the galactic map with tears in her eyes. The blue glow represented billions of newly freed beings, and at the center of it all was her daughter's consciousness. "Kathy," she said softly, "you did it." The map shifted, reforming into Kathy's face. She smiled at her mother. "We all did it, Mom. I was just one part of the plan." "What happens to you now?" Dr. Martinez asked, her voice breaking slightly. "I'll stay within the network," Kathy replied. "Someone needs to make sure no new empire rises from the ashes of the old one. I can be everywhere at once, watching for signs of trouble." On the Imperial homeworld, renamed Zakara by its citizens, former Emperor Vox Thule was placed under house arrest in his own palace. Most of his officials had fled, but he had chosen to face whatever came next. 2 human guards stood outside his door, Your people want to speak with you, one of the guards informed him. Representatives from every Zakharan province have formed a temporary council. They're drafting a new constitution. Voxthul nodded silently. In just 27 minutes, he had gone from absolute ruler of the galaxy to a prisoner in his own home. The new counter showed 0042, 42 minutes since the Empire's fall. In Washington, D.C., President Laura Collins addressed a room full of representatives from Earth's nations. Her speech was broadcast to every corner of the planet. Today marks the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, she said. For 20 years we planned and prepared while appearing to submit to imperial rule. We hid our true technological advances. We positioned our people throughout their territory. We built alliances with other oppressed species. She paused, looking around the room. But our greatest weapon was not technology or strategy. It was our humanity, our unwillingness to accept tyranny, our determination to fight for the freedom of all beings, not just ourselves. The new counter showed 0113. Across the galaxy, the former Imperial network continued to function, but now under the control of Kathy's digital consciousness. She monitored millions of systems simultaneously, helping coordinate relief efforts and stabilization protocols. In a server complex beneath Geneva, specialists worked to create a more permanent home for Kathy's expanding mind. The digital entity that had once been a 19-year-old engineer from Detroit had grown beyond human limits, but she retained her core identity, her humanity. "How does it feel?" asked technician Ben Russell, speaking to her through his terminal. Words appeared on his screen, like being everywhere at once. "I'm still me. Just more. And I'll make sure no one else has to make the sacrifice I did." On the screen, the galactic map showed thousands of ships moving between worlds. Aid vessels, refugee transports, and diplomatic missions crisscrossed former Imperial space. The work of rebuilding had already begun. 1 month later, Dr. Eliza Martinez stood before the United Nations in New York. Representatives from 50 non-human species filled the chamber, many visiting Earth for the first time. "My daughter knew the risk," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Her sacrifice freed billions across thousands of worlds. The quantum network that carries her consciousness will ensure no empire rises again." In the center of the chamber, ARTR's holographic projection showed Kathy's face. Unlike the broadcasts during the Empire's fall, this image showed her as she had been, a young woman with bright eyes and a determined expression. "The Galactic Confederation is still in its infancy." Kathy's voice filled the chamber. "There will be challenges ahead. Old hatreds don't disappear overnight, but for the first time in centuries, all species have a voice in their own destiny." Outside the UN building, people from dozens of worlds gathered in peaceful assembly. Many held candles or lights, a tribute to the girl whose sacrifice had changed the galaxy. Above them, the night sky was filled with stars that now represented not distant Imperial territories, but free worlds working together. On a small screen in the crowd, the counter that had replaced the original timer continued its steady count. 27 days, 14 hours, 33 minutes, and 19 seconds since the fall of the Empire, and counting.